Today marks the second anniversary of the Supreme Court's decision on Dobbs v. Jackson, which effectively overturned Roe v. Wade. That ruling has sparked discussions surrounding constitutional rights and who holds the power, the states or the feds. Supporters of the ruling say it's a win for fetal rights, while others argue it restricts access to health care for women across the state. Dozens of supporters gathered in Minot's Oak Park tonight for the Celebrate Life event to talk about how the decision impacted the state and country. Organizers, including some area churches, put together music, free food, and activities for kids. Now, one of the organizers, Amber Vibetto, says their goal is to establish equal justice for the unborn, adding that abortion will never be abolished until that happens.
I think that we need to switch the conversation over to the rights of the unborn. They're a special class of citizen that we do not protect in our country. And so I think that's where the conversation needs to go.
Now, meanwhile, across town, dozens of women's rights activists held a peaceful protest along Broadway to demonstrate the need for access to reproductive care, health care. The coordinator for the Minot Women's Network, Callie Bauer, said having open health care access when she was a teenager saved her life by detecting cervical cancer.
Access to health care is something that should be a fundamental right to every single person. Chances are somebody you know and love has needed to access that care. And these restrictions are doing nothing but harming women across the state of North Dakota.
Bauer says North Dakota is 46th out of 50 states with access to reproductive care. She adds that it's not just an abortion issue, but access to all kinds of health care, such as screening and contraception.